Well, welcome everybody. For those people who were here last week, this is a continuation of a talk by our guest, Vlad Shapiro. And just a little background for those who are new on Zoom or in person. This is part of the Bedford Lyceum, which is brought to you by the First Parish in Bedford, Unitarian Universalist here in Massachusetts. For those of you who are here, this is our sanctuary. All talks are free and open to the public, and no pre-registration is required. This presentation is going to be recorded and then uploaded to YouTube next week. So if you're interested in the link for those who could not attend or want to review it, please feel free to email me. And my email address, you can come up to me afterwards. It's mountainbreeze52@gmail.com. And just a few housekeeping matters. Vlad is eager to take your questions, and we'll try to get to all of you. For those who have on Zoom who have questions, during the question and answer period, please feel free to raise your virtual hand or type your questions into the chat. And please remain on mute until called upon. For those who are here in the sanctuary, please just raise your hand during that Q&A period and we'll come around with our microphone. And with that, it's our pleasure. We're honored to have Vlad Shapiro speak with us. And please take it away. Thank you, Vlad.
Thank you.
Bob, thanks for being here. That basket over there, guys, is for donations for humanitarian relief through an organization in Boston that Vlad helped us identify. It's called Maria, right? Maria. Our collection this morning in church, half of it will go to that cause. With the potatoes that our partner church has sold last week and this week and what's in there now, it looks like we're pushing it, depending on how generous you folks are today, a couple $1,000.
Yeah,
so
fantastic, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you very much for inviting me for the second time. I'm very honored that is such a great event in such a great location, and I am confirming that our choice of having a house in Bedford was the right choice. Okay. So today we would like to concentrate on Ukrainians in the United States. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Why it is very important for us, we would like to first to give you a sense of connection, historical connection of Ukrainian culture and the United States. Today is what's going on and probably what's going to happen tomorrow. I am very honored to have a representative of Ukrainian diaspora here. We have Vlad Petrov, who is a representative of Ukrainian diaspora since, I don't know, forever in this area. And he's one of the organizers. Thank you very much. Yeah. Is one of this, we're going to discuss a little bit more what this organization did for us, particularly in our family. And also we have a representative of the organization Maria, which is Dream, the Sasha right there, Sasha Goroch. MIT student, you know, maybe Fields laureate at a certain day. The Fields laureate at the premium equivalent, it's equivalent award to Oscar. I'm sorry. I'm saying Oscar because Oscar's coming, right? It's similar to the Nobel Prize. Okay, so one more announcement I would like to do. We have also a representative, a friend of mine for many, many years. You would not believe it, but we studied in the same high school, the Mark Belobrodov, right there. He's also a representative of Ukrainian community. Huh? Well, yes. No, just it's really hard to believe, but we know we knew each other from we were teenagers. How about that? And he's you know, specifically working as an attorney in specifically IP attorney. So if anybody interested, a little bit of advertisement. But anyway, we also have several of representatives of the community. You will hear more from them. Maybe more will come. So let's talk about Ukrainians in the United States. I think it's a very interesting topic. And first thing I would like to tell you is a citation from one of the researchers called Richard Scheuermann. And he said that if you ever eaten a slice of bread, you can thank Ukraine. This is not an exaggeration. The flavorful grains that transformed the North American prairies during the 19th century into continental breadbasket were varieties of native to Ukraine, which is absolutely 100% true. And the story behind this is absolutely amazing. By the way, we already distributed the list of links to the stories. And this is I would like to read, because this is a fantastic, you can read more about looking at the link. So the turkey wheats found at the home here because they moved with people who knew and grew this particular staple crop. This variety of wheat has roots in Crimea, okay, peninsula that recognized a part of Ukraine, which was under Turkish control, and also the southern part of Ukraine, like Dnipro area. It earned the German Mennonite, think about that, Stuart in 1770, after the Catherine the Great promotes settlement and promising the group they could keep their pacifist values and language. So in 1770, the Catherine allowed the Germans who were not welcome to Germany, in Germany, to come to Ukraine. It's interesting part why she chose Ukraine. She could go anywhere else. You know why? Because they decided they want to go there. They were people from agriculture. They wanted the best soil in the world. And by the way, instead of word soil, what I'm going to use? Last week, we learned that word, zemlya. Remember that word? In Ukrainian language, which you discussed, has 4 languages. So zemlya was the best. That's why they moved there. So, and then what happened later is if you see the picture on the screen, right? That is an original chest, which came with Mennonite in the United States to Kansas in 1874. So when the Mennonites were, and by the way, why Mennonites decided to move? This particular article doesn't say that, but I learned that in 1870, Alexander, actually that was Alexander III, they decided to cancel, in Alexander II, cancel the idea that Mennonites cannot serve in army. So they could be recruited to the Russian army. And in that time, it was 25 years of service. Yes, it was. So as soon as they heard that, they say, we're out of here, bye. So, but they didn't want to come empty-handed to the United States. They brought Ukrainian wheat, okay? Think about it. It took them many, many years to find the right land and right place when they do the farming. Okay, so in 1971, Kansas celebrated a century of the wheat, which came from Ukraine. All right. So we're talking about they were looking for different places, and in Kansas they found what they were looking for. The climate is very similar to the steppes of Ukraine, said Fern Bartle, director of Mennonite Heritage and Cultural Museum in Kansas. Long winters, dry in the summer, rainy in the fall and the spring. So the search for a new home in America was not solely about money. Ukrainian Mennonites in the 1970s had the deadline hanging over their head. In 1980, that's what I said, in 1880, the exemption from the Tsar Army would be coming to an end, setting them up to go against their Pacific beliefs, okay? So they were pacifists, they didn't want to fight, so they came. That year, 12,000 Ukrainian Mennonites moved to Kansas. Many of them became wheat farmers. But that is a story of one of the connections. You probably can look, it's so interesting, but do you realize that, for example, South Dakota has a Ukrainian museum? Why? Because Ukrainians moved there too. You go to Indiana, you go to other places, you found Ukrainian crops and Ukrainians moved there. But Mennonites were the first registered people who brought that thing in. Very moving and interesting story. Okay, so agriculture, obviously, we know about Ukraine as a breadbasket of Europe. Everything is cool. How about technology and science? The number one name which comes to my mind, and by the way, there are a lot of names, is Ihor Sikorsky. I hope you know that name, right? The Sikorsky Helicopters Company still has the same name. And by the way, me and my wife visited his grave in Connecticut in the same place, so 5 minutes away from the factory, which is absolutely fascinating, the whole story about how he came here. So let me tell you that for a long time, for some reason, I know you know exactly why, The Sikorsky was considered Russian, but in reality, he's Ukrainian, and I'll tell you even more about that. So Igor Sikorsky was born in Kiev on May 25th, 1889. And he is definitely a pioneer of aircraft design. So his father was a physician and professor of psychology. And his mother was also a physician, but never practiced professionally in Ukraine. The great interest in art and life work of Leonardo da Vinci adoptively simulated her son's early interest in experimenting with model flying machines. When he was 12 years old, he made his first small rubber-powered helicopter. He would rise in the air. In 1903, he went to the Naval Academy St. Petersburg, and he definitely didn't like it, so he quit it in 1906. Then he entered the Kyiv Polytechnical Institute. This is one of the oldest universities in Ukraine. And this particular monument on the right is the monument in Kyiv. The Polytechnical Institute in Kyiv is named after him. Okay, and back in Kyiv in 1909, he began constructing the first helicopter. So the first helicopters were actually built not in the United States; they were built in Kyiv. And when he moved to the United States after the revolution, he brought himself not only experience but also the models. The interesting story about Sikorsky is that, you know, not too many people in the former Russian Empire believed that he could do it. But coming to the United States with his desires, he found not only willingness to experiment, but also people who actually invested in his venture. And to me, it's an interesting history because if you think about it, so many Ukrainians with great ideas after him came to the United States and also created companies who became very, very successful. One of the stories we're going to talk about, this is, you know, when we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about that. So Igor Sikorsky, father of the helicopters, Ukrainian, you can read about this more in Britannica. And if you know that name, if you come ever to Ukraine after the victory, hopefully, you will see the monuments, you will see the museums, you will see a lot of interesting things related to him. The second person I want to talk is maybe less familiar to you, but have you heard about the Trident ballistic missile? Right? If you want to see one, you need to go where? Connecticut. There is a museum there of the submarine museum, right? Naval Museum, and you can see the actual thing. Now, well, when this Trident was created, one of the fathers of this invention was Bogdan Taras Gnatyuk. He was Ukrainian who came up to the United States and actually learned in the naval. He was commissioned by NASA to actually work on this in militaries. And he was a very essential to build all of that rocket, right? What is interesting is that because this rocket was supposed to be put on the naval ship, specifically submarine, they decided to say it has to be something, related to the sea. So he said, well, how about, and he proposed, he said, how about we call it Trident? Then we said, like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. What they didn't know is when Mr. Gnatyuk decided to choose that name, he has his tongue on his cheek, right? Because Trident is a symbol of Ukraine. And you know that because the flag of Ukraine contains a trident, right? We called it Trezub. So this is an interesting story, right? Like that. And that person you definitely have heard and seen, right? Mr. Steve Wozniak, creator of what? The personal computers in this country, right? He is 100% Ukrainian. I'll tell you even more. When many people ask me, Steve, are you a Pole? And because of my name is Wozniak, I said, no, I'm Ukrainian. His dream was come to Kyiv, and he did it. He did it in 2019 when he came to Kyiv and visited places where his predecessor lived. So Stephen Wozniak I had a chance to talk to him during the conference when he was invited as an invited speaker. And he was very, very happy to hear that I'm from Ukraine. And he always supported the Ukrainian cause. So this is today. He's still working, even though he's kind of retired, but not really. The another thing I want to tell you is that, why am I going wrong way? So another thing I'm going to tell you is, have you heard about a little company called PayPal? Yes, right? Heard about them? One of the top engineers who created the whole PayPal. He's is at the university, I believe. He was a Kyiv State University alum. He's from Kyiv. Huh? Mihmat, yeah, the same department as I studied in Natal. So there's a lot of good connections. So what happened is Ukrainian ingenuity meets with American entrepreneurship and creates fantastic results. Here is tomorrow. You probably never heard about this guy. His name is Valentin Frechka. He created an idea and built a factory which can make paper out of leaves. That happened 2 or 3 years ago. He was 14 years old when he came up with this idea. He created a company called Leaf Paper, right? Funny name. He hired a guy who is a CEO of this company who is originally from, I believe, IBM or Cisco, some serious technological company. And he was invited to participate in CES. Everybody knows what CES stands for? Consumer and Electronic Show Las Vegas. It was around 2.5 million people attending, at least. Nobody knows how many, really. So he was presenting there, and right now he is with Ukraine in war, with his factory in Lutsk. This is a city in Ukraine, right? He started to actually gather some attention. And by the way, if anybody interested in investing, but this is a serious thing. He has a bunch of customers, including L'Oreal, and bunch of other companies who are using his paper for wrapping whatever presents they do or shipping and things like that. So yes, we know that Bedford has a lot of leaves. I have personally a lot of leaves on my backyard. Maybe we should think about things, but this is the future of the technology. And I believe strongly the United States is a great place for this kind of a guy to try something what he does. Okay, moving along. Now let's talk about the culture. Okay, everybody knows what Carol of the Bells is, right? Do you know the story behind the story? Probably not. So, I already put the whole article for that, but I'm going to read a little bit. So, a group of men and women in traditional embroidered dress took stage at Carnegie Hall on October 5th, 2022. October 4th is my birthday, so I really care about that, right? For a performance that New York Tribune dubbed as a marvel of technical skills. New York Times called the music they made simply spontaneous in origin and artistically harmonized. The New York Herald described the costume-clad singers as expressing profound anonymity and feeling and arousal of genuine emotions among the listeners. The audience had cheered for encores, threw flowers on the stage, and didn't know at that time, but they had just heard what would eventually become one of the world's most beloved and recognized Christmas songs, Carol of the Bells. The onstage was Ukrainian national chorus conducted by Alexander Koshets. At the end of the part one of the program in Carnegie Hall, they performed the composer Mykola Leontovich arrangements of the traditional Ukrainian song, the playbill called Shchedrik. And by the way, to all of my Ukrainian friends, how would we translate that to English? Is that a bird? Specific bird? That's a bird, right? I'm not sure what breed of bird, but it's a beautiful bird which sings and, okay. So the audience likely also did not know that just over a year before the New York premiere, Leontovich has been assassinated by Cheka, the Bolshevik secret police. That's how they feared anything related to Ukrainian culture. Okay, now this is our friends coming with a little bit treats. As I said, today we're going to have some treats. Okay, so this particular performance inspired a New York producer and Ukrainian born person to create a new version, which would be adopted by the United States. That became the famous Carol of the Bells. And by the way, in relation to that, last year, Ukrainian director and producers made the movie called Carol of the Bells, which was demonstrated in the United States for the first time last week, exactly after my performance last week. And probably one day it will be available for a wider audience. It was a historical kind of historical situation. And it was related to Carol of the Bells. So you can probably find information online about it. And one day, I hope, it's already translated to English, so you would be able to actually see it, okay? So that is the yesterday, right? What we're talking about, the culture, yesterday is, about the music. Guess what? We just learned that the great children of the people you see on that picture has a course in Cleveland, Ohio, who are still singing the Ukrainian songs in Cleveland, Ohio. And there are some foundations who are created by those people in Cleveland who are still supporting the Ukrainian art. And by the way, I just want to introduce you one more representative of Art Society right here. Oh, please rise. While our friend and Ukrainian common, she is a performer. She's playing in bandura. She's singing. She's a musician, professional musician. Well, please, thank you very much for coming. This is today, okay? And when it comes to tomorrow, across the United States, we'll have a lot of, especially now, we have a lot of Ukrainian new musical orchestra. Lviv Symphony Orchestra right now is touring the United States. You can probably find their performances at Amherst in New York area. They were performed already in Radio City, and they will be performing at the Carnegie Hall. Okay, and what we're looking in the future, we're seeing our kids still learning about, you know, Ukrainian music and Ukrainian culture. And by the way, one thing we have in Boston area, the Jewish Center McCore created at the beginning of this year, like maybe 3 months ago, started Ukrainian dances for everybody who would like to learn what Ukrainian dance looks like. It's in Brookline. We're doing it every Tuesday at 7 p.m. So that is, you know, today is coming into tomorrow. So I believe that more Americans will see Ukrainian culture more. They would be appreciated. And by the way, one of the things we can say, we would be very happy to organize Ukrainian concert right in here. We'll talk about that later. All right, now let's talk about something Americans love, movies. Like movies? Everybody loves movies? Okay, do you know who the first guy is on the picture? His name is Louis Mayer, also known as M from MGM, Metro Goldwyn Mayer. Metro was not the guy. The Goldwyn and Mayer were two Jewish people who decided to create. Guess where he was born? Dimir. Dimir is, what is it, like 30 kilometers north from Kyiv, right? Something like that. This is the Kyiv area. I've been in Dimir several times. I remember Dimir as a little bus which goes to that area with a lot of beautiful, you know, picturesque places. And guess what? This guy was born right there. That is a founder of American modern movies, because MGM was the first big studio who decided to make a lot of interesting movies, including, anybody knows, like famous guys who played in MGM, like Charlie Chaplin, for example. Anyway, so this is from Ukraine. The guy next to him, anybody knows theater? Do you know who Lee Strasberg is, right? Okay, so I don't need to explain. Guess what? He was born in Budanov, Ukraine. And he came in this country as Ukrainian, and we're going to discuss that because both of them are not just Ukrainian, they're Jewish Ukrainian, right? And we're going to discuss that story a little bit later, but this is the fact. Now, current actors and actresses, I put all the actresses there. I don't know, there are some actors too, for sure. But the names you know, right? Olga Kurylenko. That's the famous Bond girl, the only one who did not have a relationship with the Bond. True, true, okay. Mila Jovovich, remember her? Fifth Element, right? With Bruce Willis. Go online and check Mila Jovovich Ukrainian songs. She sings Ukrainian songs. And I was shocked once when I was, in 2014, I was in Austin, Texas, and we discussed Ukraine, and suddenly I've heard Ukrainian song from the bartender. And she said, I love Mila Jovovich. She's singing this thing, okay? Okay, so Mila Kunis, you probably have heard, seen her, especially you know her husband, Ashton Kutcher. And they created one of the biggest first funds supporting Ukraine in this country, and they collected like $5 or $6 million. I don't remember, something like that. And then Vera Farmiga, my favorite actress. I loved her, was Up in the Air, that's with Clooney when they were traveling, he was traveling and firing people, right? The lady he was having an affair with, that's Vera Farmiga. She is like very openly speaking about Ukraine since 2014. Like she never hid that she's Ukrainian heritage. She was adamant supporter. But you know what's interesting today? Among Americans who have nothing to do with Ukraine, there is a huge support, like Sean Penn, for example, right? He's a big supporter of Ukraine. But that's his connections. Again, yesterday, today, What's going to happen tomorrow? I'm sure that a lot of young Ukrainian actors and actresses who are right now coming to this country as a part of U4U program, one day will be stars in Broadway and Hollywood. And I will foresee a lot of productions between the American and Ukrainians on the movie stage. Let's talk about interesting stuff called animation. Have you heard that name, Volodymyr Peter Tytler? No? That is the guy behind Pinocchio, Dumbo, Fantasia, and all of other. He's one of the leading Disney kind of animators. You can read about him. I already put some information in it. He was put in the Disney legend in 1998. He's Ukrainian heritage. He was born in Ukraine. Let's a little bit about art. You probably know the name Kazimir Malevich, right? And the famous black square, you know, of his. He's one of the probably most famous. Again, I'm not an art person, but you know, but he was born in Kyiv, Ukraine, right? And he grew up on Ukrainian culture. And when he grew up, he, you know, even in his own memoirs, he was saying that Ukraine made a lot for his building of his future career as the futurist, you know, artist. The second one story is even more interesting. Alexander Arkhipенko, less known, but you can see this particular piece at Museum of Fine Arts. The little story behind this piece is funny. Many years ago, me and Natalia went to the museum and found out that that one was written as Alexander Arkhipenko, Russian. We went to the museum and said, he's Ukrainian. They changed the label. And now you can see this piece and his other pieces at MFA anytime you want to come there. And by the way, when you go to MFA right now until the end of this month, you will see a Ukrainian, I can't call it an art exhibition, but it's interesting exhibition related to current war, which has some graphics from the artist who lives right now, I believe in Lithuania, in Lithuania, and also video about the Ukrainian children and how Americans came to help Ukrainian children to bring them in. That's an MFA right now. Yesterday, today. And tomorrow, I'm absolutely sure that we're going to have more and more Ukrainian artists and more Ukrainian. One of the examples of Ukrainian art you will see right here. We have more of them, and we would be very happy in this hall to have a little, you know, presentation and maybe exhibition of the art we have. And also, you know, Pamsel can confirm that a lot of Ukrainians in the area have very important pieces of art of Ukrainian painters and sculptors who would be very happy to show to American public the quality and interest in that. So that is in the plans. And my favorite subject, sports. Okay. Do you know how many Ukrainian heritage players play right now in NHL? Do you know that Wayne Gretzky has Ukrainian roots? Do you know who's Keith Tkachuk? Or we should call him Tkachuk. His son became an MVP of the All-Star Games yesterday, right? He is Ukrainian. But the most famous Bostonian Ukrainian is the Yuki line. Johnny Boychuk, Vic Stasuk, and Branko Horvat, even though Horvat's not really Ukrainian. But that was the famous line, and somebody maybe even remember them because I just only know them from the pictures. And I saw Boychuk once in a while, but he's Ukrainian, all Ukrainians. Ukrainian hockey was like, how does that happen, right? Ukrainians have big time in sports. You probably heard about Brother Klitschko, right? One of them is a mayor of Kyiv right now. Both of them were world champs. They were champions, and yes, right, yeah, there's a big hockey player. But number one sport of Ukraine is European soccer, football. Right? That is what Mr. Shevchenko, who is a famous player, and many, many others. In the United States MLS, there were 10 players from Ukraine who were playing. In NHL, there were several players from Ukraine, born in Ukraine, who played here. One of them was Dmytro Hristich, who played for Boston Bruins for many times. Another one was a person who had 2 Stanley Cups wins, and he played for Tampa Bay and New York. But as I said, you know, soccer is the big one. And if you look at the young people around here, because we have a lot of immigrants from Ukraine, I know a lot of kids who are playing soccer and are really, really good all around the United States who are Ukrainian heritage. There were several leagues, even in some places, Ukrainian leagues of Ukrainian immigrants in this country, but we will talk about this when we're going to talk about diaspora. Okay? So now the main conversation, and we're going to try to keep it short. Ukrainian diaspora in the United States. Mr. Vsevolod could give us a lecture for maybe a couple of hours about the Ukrainian diaspora in the United States, right? Yes, and we also have an exhibit. And by the way, can you share with us where the distinguished people can actually see it, if they would like to see it? If we can bring it here, if they're interested. Okay. Okay. Right. So basically, as you already have heard from Mennonite stories, the Ukrainians started to come here at the end of 19th century. And their center was definitely New Jersey, New York area, Chicago, Maryland, Michigan, Ohio. What's common between all of those? Soil, zemля, right? You already know that. Massachusetts also has zemля, but not that great for specifically growing the wheat, right? But because Boston is a center of science and universities is a center, that's why in Boston at Harvard, there was created the Harvard Research Institute, for Ukrainian Research Institute. And a lot of Ukrainians came here to become working for high-tech industry, right? So, interesting story about statistics. If you look online, you will see that they say there are 355,000 immigrants born in Ukraine who came to the United States in history, in the whole history, which is kind of a statistics related to people who declare themselves at Ellis Island as Ukrainians. But what is missing, for example, as a Jewish American, Jewish Ukrainian American, I can say, is a Jewish immigration. More than around 1 million Jews from Ukraine came to this country. But that statistics is completely different because when they were asked on the border, they spoke Yiddish, right? They considered themselves Jewish. And because it was a Russian Empire, they are put somewhere here as in statistics as Jewish Russians. But here's an interesting story. First of all, the diaspora in the United States is very educated. If you take a look at the statistics, 55.5% of people who were born from Ukraine has a higher education to the 33% of if they're in the United States. But what is interesting here is, where's my other slides? Okay, what is interesting here is that there was something called the, when we were talking about Ukrainian Jews, for example, right? In the time of the Tsarist Russia, there was something called Pale of Settlement. I don't know if you heard about it. Jews were not allowed to actually live outside of this Pale of Settlement. And if you look at the map of Pale Settlement, you will see an article about that I put into the references, that most of 50% of all the settlement information, right, were actually Ukraine. And there was more than 1 million Jews came before the revolution, more than 1 million Jews came to the United States after the revolution. If you guess that 50% of those were Jews from Ukraine, and you can add those numbers together, you get the million. And by the way, if you look at statistics of the Jews, Soviet Jews coming to the United States, guess from where most of them came? From Ukraine. Okay, but as we discussed before, they were for a long time did not consider themselves as a part of Ukrainian community for many reasons. One of them was anti-Semitism, which was in the Soviet Union as really, really, really bad. And during the Tsarist time, there were pogroms, Jewish pogroms in the territory of Ukraine. But what's interesting about it, that most of them were organized by Russians. That part of history was usually not discussed much, But anyway, what happened is when, until recently, until 2014, most of the Jewish population who came from, let's say, Soviet Union, because I'm a part of this population, right? How to say that, they didn't consider themselves Ukrainian per se. But as soon as Russian invasion happened, especially after Maidan 2013, 2014, the amount of Jews who came from Ukraine, who considered themselves Ukrainians, skyrocketed. One of these examples is Center McCoran leader, Volodymyr Fogelman, who, 2014 specifically said, I'm Ukrainian, I'm a Ukrainian Jewish person. And because for a long time, we were not in the position of speaking Ukrainian language. Our grandparents spoke Yiddish. They didn't speak Russian. But then their parents were speaking Russian because that was a Soviet Union language for everybody. Okay. Another thing is what I would like to say is specifically related to the local Boston area, just the story of Natalia, my wife. She was born in Ukraine as a part of, her mom is Jewish, her father is Ukrainian. She grew up surrounded by Ukrainian intelligentsia. Okay. So, question is, what's the relationship to the diaspora? Well, I'll tell you what's the relationship with the diaspora. When the Ukrainians were prohibited to study real Ukrainian history and real Ukrainian culture in the Soviet Union, a lot of immigrants brought the culture here. So it would be very interesting, but there was a Ukrainian government and president in exile in the United States. When Ukraine became independent, Mykola Plavyuk, who was at that time a position of the president, came to Kyiv and formally transferred the power to Ukrainian presidents, to Kravchuk, who was the first elected president of Ukraine. So her family knew about it. They had connections. Absolutely, if somebody would find out about that connection, you can end up in prison. Okay, it was very secret. And then, in the beginning of after the Ukraine became an independent, these people started to come to to Ukraine, and Ukrainians discovered a huge plot of research done on Ukrainian matter in the United States. Why? Because the United States is the country where every culture can thrive, and we are the country who accept these ideas that we have a chance, right? So now, since 2011, Natalia is a part of that Ukrainian diaspora. And now she is the Ukrainian diaspora for the people who live in Ukraine. So now she has an ability of being a part of two sides. Okay. And I'm being part of actually four sides, because I'm not only Ukrainian, but also Jewish. So the Jewish community over there, Jewish community here, kind of interesting. So let's shortly talk about the Boston area. And I think that's basically the time I would like to leave a lot of time of discussion for us. So on the list you have, trust me, it's not all of the organizations we have put on the list. But important organizations you have to know is Ukrainian Congress Committee of America, representative which several Petrov, Shevchenko Society, which is located in New York City, but also have representation everywhere, which was kind of a Academy of Science in exile, right, for Ukrainian. Ukrainian Culture Center of New England, Ukrainian American Education Center, which is a part of it. Ukrainian Youth Association called SUM, many volunteers, charity organizations. I'm not going to list them. Some of them are there. We have a representative of the organization, Sasha, and I would like her to have a word for us, a couple of words about what her organization does, because last time someone asked me a question about MRIA. So if you don't mind, I would like to give a couple of minutes to Sasha. And by the way, you can ask questions about this organization later. Sasha, please. Do you have a microphone? Yeah, you should do so. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much for giving the word to me. And thank you so much to all of you for coming here today. My name is Sasha. I'm Ukrainian. I am now a sophomore at MIT studying math and economics. I am the president of Ukraine at MIT student group and MRIA director. MRIA is a nonprofit organization based here in Boston that fundraises for and provides humanitarian and medical aid to Ukraine. I spent my last summer and this January in Ukraine volunteering on the ground. And our president of MRIA also goes to Ukraine in the summer and whenever has a chance. Our team is actually pretty small. We are all full-time students, but nevertheless, we were able to raise over $50,000 worth of supplies and deliver them to Ukraine and directly to people who need them the most. Thanks to Vlad, today's part of your donations would go to MRIA so that we can provide Ukrainians with medical and humanitarian aid they need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, okay, we have two churches, one of them Ukrainian Orthodox and another one Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, we called it. And we also have a Harvard Ukrainian Research Institute as the big research center for the whole United States. Particularly having it in Boston area is very, very, very important for all of us. That is basically the short story about Ukraine now. The Ukrainian life and culture in Boston area is very wide. We have Ukrainian festivals. Recently, we had the Independence Day Vertep, which is a celebration for around Christmas time. And Ukrainian Flag Day was a big success. We did it around the George Washington Monument. We have concert exhibitions. We have activism. We had already, starting from February, we had many events like rallies and demonstrations in Boston specifically. As I said, we have a dancing, we have a book club, we have picnic, and every one of you is invited, for sure. Because one thing we need is more involvement with American activities, with American groups who support us, who understand what we need, and also tell you more about us. That, to me, is critical, okay? So, what we're going to do right now, this is basically the end of my kind of a speech. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to open floor for questions. But before we do that, I would like to show you on the screen something which I called the Timothy Snyder Memorandum. As I mentioned before, there is a famous, probably the most prominent American-Ukrainian researcher who is not Ukrainian, right? Who is at Yale University, who probably, as I recommended before, you can listen to his lectures on YouTube, free, about Ukraine. On January 23rd, he came up with this particular list of why United States should go for the Ukrainian victory, okay? I think we already delivered to all of you the link to the original memorandum. You can find it, huh? Yeah, not everybody. So it's in the list of the references, which I put right there. The first one, why the world needs Ukrainian victory. You will receive, if anybody wants to see the original, you can just type Timothy Snyder, why world needs Ukrainian victory, or Ukrainian victory, and you will see. So I'm going to put those 15 points. You can read them. I'm not going to go through them. If you would like to discuss any of those as a part of your questions, I would love to definitely do that. If you have any other questions about Ukrainians in the United States, the importance of our connections, I just want to say that the speech from Sasha was example of the future. And what I'm seeing in the future, that after the victory, first we have to get to the victory together. But after the victory, I'm absolutely sure that collaboration and cooperation between the United States and the Ukraine on the state level, on the business level, on the research, culture will be so big that it would be very good if any of you are specifically interested in a specific area of that future collaboration would like to get involved, let us know. Because we are right now in the process of actually collecting information on people and organizations, not only for donations, but also future work, because we need experience. We need people with knowledge who can help to rebuild rebuild what was destroyed and build something new. Because we really want Ukraine to getting out of this war as a modern, Western-oriented state with Western values and access to the latest and greatest, not only technology, but also civics and traditions and in every part of life. So this is the list. If you want to go over that, we can discuss, or you have any other questions, thank you very much. And I'd like to hear it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Vlad.
Okay. A little bit better? Okay,
Yeah.
so the first point, halt the atrocity. This is for Snyder was number one. Stop all of these horrible things happening. Second, preserve international order. Third, the end of era of empire. Russia is the last empire left, big empire. Four, defend peace project in the European Union. European Union was created for peace. Now it's in shambles. First, to give the rule of the law a chance in Russia. This is the answer to one of the questions I received last time. What should we do and how can we help? Six, to weaken the prestige of the tyrant. As you understand, when Putin was bragging about how strong he is, the other tyrant look at him and say, hey, that's not such a bad idea. But if we defeat the tyrant, that would be a good idea for every message to every tyrant. To remind us that democracy is the better system. Yes, democracy is not 100% proof, right? We have some issues. Today we have a lot of issues. But unfortunately, there is no better system created by humans. That's the only one we know which kind of works, right? The other thing is to lift threat of major war in Europe. If Ukraine will not win, as you know, Russia will never stop. They will gain more power and they will start to go after Poland, after Baltic republics, and who knows? The most famous slang is like a message you can find on cars in Russian was "Na Berlin," which means "get Berlin, go to Berlin," because in 1945 they did it, right? And by the way, not many people know, but Zhukov, who was one of the top generals, actually proposed go all the way to the Atlantic Ocean through the powers of England and the United States and France. Because at that time, the Soviet army was so strong, they theoretically could do it. Thank God it didn't, but fact. To lift the major threat of major war in Asia. You know that Russia particularly is in Asia, and Asia is a very unstable region. So in case of Russian success, guess what? It's going to get another war. To prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. That's an interesting one. Why? Because Ukraine gave up nuclear weapons in Budapest Memorandum and got attacked. The other country look at the Russians and say, hey, you know what? If somebody like Russia tries to attack us, that's a bad idea. So we need to have to develop our own nuclear weapons. Since the world cannot guarantee our freedom and our safety without that, right? If we win in Ukraine, that's going to be a good reason not to do it. The reduced risk of nuclear war, obviously, to head off the future resource wars. That is an interesting one because, as you know, last time people asked me, how about resources in Ukraine? Oh, yes, big time. In my opinion, when we talk about resources, it's not coal, it's not ore, it's people. 40 million people, okay? In addition to everything else. To guarantee food supplies and prevent future starvation, one of the weapons the Putin uses is grain, delivery of grains. The struggling Ukraine could not deliver grain for a long time, which created issues in countries like Africa, because Ukraine supplied like what, 70% of all the grain to Africa, something like that. So he's using that in their own needs. And guess what? Somebody look at this and like, interesting. Maybe we can do the same thing, right? Finally, next one is to accelerate the shift from fossil fuels. As you understand, 90% of all the money Russia has comes from what? Selling oil and gas. Even today, under sanctions, they still sell them a lot to places like China, India, okay, and through going around and deviate through even Turkey, okay. So less dependency of fossil fuel robs Russia from all of those resources, money, right? Makes sense. And finally, to affirm the value of freedom. Ukraine symbolized freedom. Ukraine is the country, one of the not too many countries who has, for example, a religious council, which contains a representative of every religion represented in Ukraine today, including Christians of any kind of sort, Muslims, Jews, Buddhists. And that council works under president of Ukraine. And every law related to religion is actually going through that council, which is an example of a freedom. Ukrainians are fighting for the land, not only because it's their land, it's because they finally realize they are free. They can define their future, their future is not going to be defined in Moscow or Warsaw or any other places. The future will be defined in Ukraine. So these are the 15 points of Timothy Snyder. And he also said in his article, if you want to help Ukraine, buy Ukrainian merchandise, go to your representative and make sure that all the laws we're continuing supporting, go to Ukrainian rallies, go to Ukrainian concerts and events, look at the Ukrainian art, volunteer, and don't concentrate only on today, but think about tomorrow too. Get ready for all of your knowledge and all of your connections and things, and think about what can you do to help that happen.
Thank you, Vlad. We can now go into the question and answer period. And for those who are on Zoom, please feel free to type your questions into the chat, or if, do we have someone, we have Craig working offline? Okay. So, and those people who are in here at the church, if you can raise your hand, we'll come around. Rich and I will handle this. Oh, okay, Sarah's going to do that side. Okay, great. And one point of housekeeping also, we have some beautiful artwork against the lectern here that is from the Ukraine, and also a calendar that's been created by artists who are Ukrainian Americans or Ukrainian. Okay. Did you want to talk about that, Natalia, before we go into Q&A?
Yeah, tell you about the calendar.
Okay, 1 minute.
Okay, so, yeah, so I'm just going to say, since I'm making, yeah, no, you want to say something? Okay, okay, so I'll say, yeah. Yeah, just you can.
Thank you very much. I hoped Vlad will tell everything. You know, we are happy that your church is one of the first places where we can show wonderful work of two wonderful peoples, enameled artists, Tanya and Serhiy Kolechko. They are well known in Ukraine. They had many exhibitions. They were invited to make plein air and teaching how to make enamel to Germany and to France. And I am happy that we are old friends with them. We know each other for more than 30 years, and I love them for more than 30 years. And I was very happy when I asked them, make a calendar with the pictures, with photos of your artworks. And they said yes. And now we try to represent them for you. Thank you that you bought some of the calendars now. And yeah, Tanya and Serhiy, I asked, when war started, I asked them, maybe you will come to us or to Europe. They said, God gives us place to be born. This is Ukraine. And if it will come the moment where we will the last minute of our lives, we want it will be our land, our country, Ukraine. They spread and I can talk about them very long. You see, I love them, and you know why. You see why. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right,
I'm
questions?
sorry, go ahead, Vlad.
Questions? Yeah, I'm just ready.
So, Sarah has some questions.
Hello, thank you very much for what you've shared with us today. I think your 15 points are very compelling.
Thank you.
They relate to each other and, in a sense, represent a holistic approach which shows how much is at stake in all of this. What I don't see, since there are compelling reasons why the international community should solidly be behind a peace effort in the Ukraine, what I don't see is how to stop the atrocity, to take your first point, and to have a peace process that ends up ending the war. And I'm just maybe not well enough schooled in the matter, but it seems like the Ukrainians want everything back, understandably, and the Russians want to hold on to everything they've got, which isn't as much as they wished, but at least it's something. I don't think that's a solution that either one or the other sides would reject that solution, and so I don't see, as compelling as the case is to stop it, to end it, I don't see how to do it.
Well, again, thank you for question. Those are points from Mr. Yeah, those are points from Timothy Snyder. I'm not going to get authorship for that. But let me answer this question, and I really, if you don't mind, we have representative of our Ukrainian community. I would like to hear their opinions too, if you don't mind, right? So my answer on this one. As I discussed last time, when we're talking about Russian Federation, right, or the Russian Federation forces, or Russian Federation leadership, right, we're not talking about kind of a monolith group of people. Putin is not Stalin. As I mentioned last time, Stalin was not told to not start the war because of Olympic Games, okay? He was, and he complied. Putin is some kind of a consensus between competing groups within the Russian power. Why Putin is still in power? Not because he has an iron fist, because he's convenient for the rest of the people around him at this moment. More war rages, less success they had, more victories Ukraine had on the battlefield, less stable position of Putin is. The only way to have any kind of a conversation with Russia is change of the leadership. The current leadership will never talk. So the West should do everything in their power to make that happen. Definitely the hands of Russians themselves. Ukraine will never cross the border and try to attack Russia in Russia. Not going to happen. But Russia is not monolithic again. There are a lot of underground, things going on over there. As you probably have heard, the typical biggest war right now is between the Prigozhin and his private Chivaka Wagner and the Ukrainian and the Russian army. They just don't like each other, right? And this is just on the surface. That's what we know. Remember that the Russian Federation in the last 20-something years was built on an idea that the best way of being good, making yourself great, is to steal money. And whoever has more chances to get to the government pocket and steal more money, that's the person who would be in charge. All of their oligarchs, they all bought their factories or whatever they have, oil wells, for nothing, right? So everybody who's close to Putin, who is loyal to Putin and his group, got those advantages, right? Yes, West started to press really hard on them. Some of these people are out of their money, like Friedman, like Abramovich, right? But the key people are still there, right? The Kovalchuk and other people around him. So if there is a war between them, if they started to see that their money within Russia started to dwindle, they are not ascets. They're not people who want to live on this little. They love the Western valleys in terms of, good cars, good food, good trips. They love that stuff. They're not going to give up on this one, right? So West should use that, right? And more arms to Ukraine, more powerful Ukraine is, more chances that these people behind Putin would sense that, we're going in the wrong direction. We are having a chance. They still believe they can win. As soon as they stop believing that they can win, that's what changes the war. Mark, Vsevolod, would you like to add something to it? What do you think? Yeah.
I surely do. Thank you for the question. I also heard the question a lot when I do what Vlad does. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
So I don't have an answer that you're looking for. Vlad gave a really great attempt at the answer. I'm going to complicate your question even more. This is a non-traditional war. This war is not 1 year old, it's not even 8 years old, it's 400 years old. It's a culmination of 400 years of the war launched by Russian Empire against Ukraine. And not to pick on you, I'm not, but what you said, the Ukraine. So you learn that from Russian propaganda, teaching their way of calling the country that they conquered. The Ukraine is the territory. You just patronized the country. You deny the country verbally. It's right to exist. It's intentional. It's not your fault. You learned that in school, right? I learned that in school, the Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's Ukraine. It's a country. It's independence. The Ukraine, Russians taught you that. So what's happening now is really existential problem, existential horror that, looking from the standards of geopolitics or war in Vietnam, where all wars end in a peace treaty.
Yeah.
Warring parties hate each other, and then they live for centuries together. England and France fought 100 years of war, and now they are very close allies. This is something that the world have not seen. The level of atrocities, sadism, everything else is on a scale unimaginable precisely because it's 400-year-old lineage of that kind of aggression. Therefore, how the war will end? The war will not end with some kind of, let's cut 10% of Ukraine and give it to Russia and they will be satisfied. No, they will come back for more. And no, we're not going to let that 10% of the population be raped. And this is not something that is even acceptable. Remember, Ukrainians are very proud, and they showed this past year that they're amazing in fighting, and they're amazing in rising up. So even if, let's say, God forbid, if the world says, Ukraine, we don't have any more shells to give you, we can't make them anymore, you fire too much, you're not getting as much support as you need. Well, and the government says, well, we probably should negotiate. There will be burning tires, there will be an uprising, there will be a new leadership in the country, and they will keep fighting. So, as Vlad said, it's economic leverage, it's the willpower, and recognition that those empires are the strongest 24 hours before they collapse.
That's correct.
We saw it in the USSR that fell because of Chernobyl embarrassment, because of economic arms race, and other reasons but until the collapse, no one could predict that, right?
That's right.
So this is the frame of mind we should all adopt, that we should keep the resolve, we should keep helping Ukrainians as much as they need, and wear them out. Unfortunately, not war of attrition happens on the battlefield, but also war of attrition economically. And like Vlad said, they are much, much weaker internally, as we believe.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah.
I do not disagree. I don't disagree with anything that was said, but I'm going to try to make it simple. And I'm going to refer to what Schneider said at one point, that this, in fact, is Russia is one of the last empires out there. And we all, speaking as nations, have moved, or most have moved from the notion of empire. The United States no longer has manifest destiny. Britain is no longer the empire that goes and teaches everybody how to live right. Nor are the Dutch, nor are the Spanish who went to South, that was a mode that we all, as nations, lived in. The Soviet Union is still there. They feel that they can, by force, tell people what to do and take away people's rights and dictate what it should be. And that's really at the point that they stop that is when the victory happens for Ukraine and for everybody else. And it may prevent one or two others who are lurking to see if they can try to do this. So that's just my comment.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I find myself frustrated in not able to do more in order to resolve this problem between Russia and Ukraine. And I happen to know, Sharon and I, several Russians who we visited at their homes, and they visited at our home. I'm also quite certain that they do not support this war in Ukraine. So my question, and I've tried a couple times to communicate. I did communicate a couple times since the beginning of the war with one of my friends in St. Petersburg. And the second time I sent him a message, he sent me one back and said, "Be careful, Bob." He didn't want me to, I didn't want to get him in trouble by being an American communicating with him at this time. But still, the question that I'm frustrated about is that there isn't more that we can do at the grassroots level in Russia to convince people or to get them to speak. I mean, they are speaking out at some level, but they're being suppressed by Putin and his people. And somehow, my question really is, what else, if anything, can we do to, at the grassroots level, to communicate with the Russian people who have a different philosophy about this, I'm quite sure, and where maybe we can have some effect on that end?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So again, I'm not from Russia, but I have relatives in Russia. I have friends and read a lot of things about Russia, what's going on. As I said last time, unfortunately at this moment, it's very hard because they're blind and deaf. But what is interesting, I just read a very interesting article on one of the opposition Russian websites. And it's about related to one of the research done by a Russian professor. He's teaching at the University of Texas, surprisingly enough. And he told that traditionally, most of the Russians are, he called them the ticketless passengers, or freeloaders, whatever you're going to call it. So basically, the idea is like this. We hate the regime. We want it to change, but let somebody else do that, not me. You know, there are some other more strong people stronger guys who can go and crash it, and I would support them. But until that happens, I will sit in the corner quietly, and I want a free ride. Free ride to democracy, free ride to the change. Because that is what's going on, right? Now, when you talk to people, and I would like to separate the Russians here versus Russians in Russia. Okay. The biggest question me and my wife has is the following. When you are in the United States and in Europe, why there is no massive demonstrations and rallies by Russian people against Putin's regime? There was only one in Prague, I believe, was it March? That was it. There is no demonstrations against the Russian. There is some kind of a group of very energetic and formerly very connected Russian exile people who are, gathering in Frankfurt. Recently it was in Munich, and before it was Warsaw. I'm talking about, people like, Kasparov, people like some people who were very influential, and they're kind of getting together and kind of, they're against Russia, big time against the policy. The problem is there's only like 30 of them, or like 40 or whatever, and they believe that they can overthrow. No, it's not going to happen. Most of the population, so this is my question to everybody, why there's no demonstrations? The answer is very simple. When I ask them why you don't demonstrate, they say, well, we're afraid of the relatives who are in Russia because they're going to be in trouble if we demonstrate here. We still have relatives there. Not everybody can leave. I mean, there are a lot of people who would love to leave, but they can't physically. But the silent majority of Russians will accept whatever government they have. Tomorrow, somebody else shot Putin, God help us, and somebody come in and say, we did something very, very bad to Ukraine, we're pulling out from Ukraine, guess what's going to happen to most population? Say, yeah, let's get out. Right? So the tradition of being slaves in their mind is what happened in Russia for the Russians sitting in Russia. But the Russians here, they're also afraid. They're afraid that somebody will come for them, for their relatives, right? The completely different story when you ask people who emigrated from the Soviet Union. That's a big difference between emigrating from Russia versus emigrating from Soviet Union, right? Most of the people who immigrated from Leningrad, Moscow, and other big cities coming to Boston area, who are scientists, researchers, computer science, whatever, who are mostly Jewish, but not necessarily. If you ask them, they're going to tell you, it's not my war. I never voted for Putin. I have nothing to do with Putin. I hate him. I'm supporting Ukraine. I'm sending money. I'm volunteering. People came to Mexico from here They came to Mexico, but there was a time when with Mexico, in Tijuana, they had a bunch of Ukrainians who are trying to cross the border. By the way, do you know what is the biggest group of people trying to cross the border to the United States right now in Mexico? Russians. Yes, there are more than several thousand Russians, young men mostly, with computers who are working remotely, who want to come to the United States. I'm not kidding you. This was written in, I don't remember what press was that, but you can get this information. So instead of fighting the regime, they're running away because they know they can't. Right? But coming back to the immigration, these people will never consider themselves. They say, we came from Soviet Union. Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. Now we're Americans. We're against this war. We're against, but I mean, we didn't vote. Why we should feel responsible? And when you ask them a question, can you tell me, 5 years ago, I remember you came from Russia because you had relatives there or you visited them, and you came back and you said, such a beautiful country, such a great theater, such a great museum, such a great universities. We loved it. We come home, we remember our nostalgia when we were young, we lived there. It's so beautiful over there. Again, not 20 years ago, 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we had what? Ukraine was already in war with Russia, right? 2014 already happened, Crimea already happened, but these people love Moscow theaters so much that they can't live without it. You know what they're doing here? They're organizing their improvised Russian theaters, right? They hold the whole discussion about why should we cancel Russian culture? It's nothing to do with Tchaikovsky or like Tolstoy. They have nothing to do with Putin, right? Like Putin was not even born when these people were, doing something. So this is interesting narrative. We connect. I mean, yes, true. But what they're missing and what they really don't understand is that their heads were brainwashed back in the Soviet Union about how great the Russian culture was and how superior the Russian, like we discussed it last time, how superior Russian culture is to the Western cultures, especially in the United States. Because the United States, you don't have a culture, no literature, no nothing, right? Compared to Tolstoy, no. Come on. This is what in their heads, right? So when you are trying to fight this war, we're not fighting, and this is what to your question, it's not they're not our enemies, right? No, but this is what we have to explain. This is like, guys, this is what's going on. They don't understand that by going to the theaters in 2017 to Russia, by buying their merchandise, right? By telling everybody how great Russia is and you should visit and you should come, they were sponsoring this war. Okay? This is what they don't understand. And I'm talking about immigration. And by the way, a lot of them are Jewish, as I said. And one of the things they're saying about Putin, they said, well, maybe he's a bad guy, but he's not anti-Semitic. You know why they're saying that? Because they still believe that Ukraine is anti-Semitic. And they want to compare that one to another. Say like, well, why are you supporting somebody who's pogroms and but they're in this story about the atrocities during the World War II against Jews. I'm Jewish. I know about that. My whole half of my family is buried in Babi Yar, and probably some of your family too. Okay, and I know that a lot of people who were shooting my relatives were not Germans. Okay, they were local population. Yeah. Okay. But anyway, so this is kind of an answer to me related. So what we can do, we can support anybody like Lev Yashin, anybody else who is openly talking about, against. And we have to tell our Russian friends here, go to demonstrations. We don't hear your voice at all. Start speaking. Okay. Yeah. I want a more Marek. Я хочу.
So this is a very valid and very painful question. And in this polite company, I will not be psychoanalyzing Russians. I have a lot to say. But practical advice. And again, not why they're doing this, how good of people they are. First of all, ask your friends who's Crimea. That's a wonderful biomarker. If it's anything other than we stole it, it's Ukrainian, they are sick. They are zombies. Second, practically, Russians need to understand as a nation, as a group of people living behind that fence, it's not okay. The frame of mind, imagine what Americans did taking Germans to Buchenwald. You lived 5 kilometers away. You saw the smoke. You were told not to look that way. You knew. You can't tell us you didn't know what's happening. Russians, think of Russians, at some point, every Russian should visit Bucha. Every Russian should visit Izum, cemeteries. Russians in Russia today need to know. Someday, you'll be asked to visit. Right now, your country is doing something that is beyond the pale. And it's not your fault, it's your responsibility. Learn about it. Don't like, oh, we're beyond politics. We don't know. What can we do? Oh, I'm against Putin. Oh my God, if you have a family in Ukraine, but they have some, nationalistic elements, right? So they kind of were asking for it. Cut, if you're talking to them, if they're talking to you, cut, there's no equivocation. There is no, for once in probably history of mankind, we have good versus evil, all the way, 100%. So talking to Russians, realize, yes, you're in a country, you are responsible. What your country is doing, there is no explanation other than this is absolutely unacceptable. I can't give you, but that's kind of as practical, I guess, as it gets. And I also have former colleagues who love Russia and been to Russia and what about Tchaikovsky? Well, he's Ukrainian, and this is a weapon of war.
Next question. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. I just wanted to add something short, that while there are indeed Russians who support Ukraine and who know what's happening is not right and trying to do something to stop it, unfortunately, there are also many Russians who support it. And I mean it like even here in US. I would think that at MIT, people would have the access to all the information they need to know what's really happening. They have Ukrainian MIT student group who are telling them our own experience. I'm telling them about my friends who were murdered during Russian shelling of residential areas and other things like that. But still, when 2 days ago, Ukrainian MIT installed a box for hand warmers donations to Ukraine that would go to first responders who save people from under ruins at 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Some people donated hand warmers there, and overnight, someone stole them and put the box away on the other side of the corridor. I put the bags back. I didn't know there were hand warmers there, so I thought that maybe no one donated yet. The same night, there were more hand warmers there, and today morning, when I walked by, it was already gone again. It's a very frustrating thing. And we all want to believe that everyone knows what happens and knows it's not right. But the unfortunate thing it's not always the case. We do not know how many people in Russia support or do not support. And while it's good to support those who are trying to fight it, it's also important to keep mindful that it might not always be their goal. Thank you.
Bob, or Webb, is there anything on the remote folks? Anyone have their hand up that we ought to pay attention to? Why don't we attend to that right now?
Oh, hello, everybody. Thank you for recognizing me. I'll just read my question very quickly. Along with resisting Russia's cruel and illegal invasion, Ukrainians are also struggling to build a more just and inclusive civil society. You already referred to this. Can you please say more? P.S. Both struggles are inspiring. The world thanks Ukrainians. And when I ask for a response, anybody, Sasha or Vlad, anybody can reply. Thank you very much.
Definitely would like to ask Sasha, because they know much more than I do because they live there.
So I love talking about Ukraine and acceptance and being more friendly to everyone because I'm personally a non-binary person. I'm transgender, and I'm open in Ukraine. Over the last several years, I saw a great improvement in public view and how people approach me. It has nothing to do with the way it works in Russia. In Russia, it would be illegal to have not just a queer flag on the building, but even a queer pin on your backpack. In Ukraine, I'm open to everyone. People are using my pronouns just because they hear me using them. And most people are willing to talk, to hear, and support, especially now as all Ukrainian queers are either on the front lines or volunteering or elsewhere trying to protect their home and loved ones. So I feel it's very important to recognize that Ukraine is a lot more friendly space than Russia. And Ukraine is actually moving towards being more accepted very fastly. And the only reason why it is not yet there is the Soviet Union history that forced the correctness and the only right way to be on people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to add the following. Ukraine wants to be a member not only of the European Union, but also a member of the world, modern world. There are new laws coming in Ukraine supporting the diversity and inclusion. If you look at the prominent Ukrainian sports guys, one of them, his name is Jean Belenyuk. He's, I can't call it African American, but he's an African descent, African Ukrainian, whatever you want to call it, right? He is the one who talked a lot about this problem coming from the Soviet Union. And he is the one right now, is a head of a lot of committees. He's one of the most prominent people of the Ukrainian sports ministry. And he is the one who was asked many times during world events. You can find him, Jean Belenyuk. He's an Olympian champion, I believe, two times Olympian champion in track and field. And you can check it out, his responses when he say that society is healing. Society is changing. It's changed a lot since 2014, I'm telling you right now. And for Ukraine, one of the things they put together as an important part is being, looking at things and getting rid of the traditional Soviet view. And as I said in my first lecture, in Soviet Union and in Russia today, using derogatory language towards minorities is norm. Sorry. And it's not only norm for regular people, it's also norm for prominent people. You can find it in literature, you can find it in movies, you can find it in theaters. So that is kind of a common thing. Not in Ukraine. Not in Ukraine. And I believe that the difference is that Ukrainians traditionally were very acceptable to anybody who lives on the territory. If you work hard, if you have your family and you have your values and you are helping community, it doesn't matter. You are part of Ukrainian nation. Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah. Any other questions online?
My turn, Bob. Yeah, I think last time I mentioned that I belong to a group of 8 folks who meet every couple of weeks and talk about these kind of things, and we do a lot of thought experiments. One is, had it not been for the West sort of agreeing that Ukraine being a member of NATO was a pretty good idea, Russia at least would have stayed home on this round. You can comment on that in a minute. Another one is, it's the oligarchs that have everything to lose or win. So how much money does the West, including the United States, spend on helping Ukraine fight this war? Well, let's get those oligarchs around the table and say, what do you need? We'll provide it for you instead of Russia providing it for you. Crazy stuff that in a thought experiment you can do. And another one is, all right, we come up with an agreement. You can comment on this too, and then I'll sit down. Russia, go home. Keep what you got, okay? We will not let Ukraine in NATO unless you do this again, and they're immediately in, things like that. But what it amounts to is what we're all looking for, some way out of this damn mess that the world finds itself in. And it's going, Russia's not going to stop. We all, this group of 8, agree they're not going to stop. Ukraine's not going to give up. So what is the most logical outcome of that? And I think what most of us agree to, Ukraine loses, okay? So you can comment on all those or just tell me to shut up and go home.
So I would say, I like thought experiments. As a mathematician, I really, love this idea. But when we have more time, I'll give you a couple of jokes about that, about the thought experiments. But let's go one by one. First, NATO. I do know several people in this country, including our immigrants, and not only immigrants, Americans, who say NATO made a big mistake. If in 2007, and 2007 was famous for Putin's Munich speech. Have you heard about that? Yes. So that was the first time when he decided to start speaking really loudly about that Russia is underappreciated, that West is pushing Russia to the brink, that they're bringing NATO to the borders of Russia, and how terrible it is. Some people say if 2007, the NATO would say, we will not accept Ukraine as a part of NATO, then Russia would say, okay, we're fine. We'll be okay. We're not going to touch Ukraine. Well, as I discussed you last week, Ukraine being under Russia is essential for keeping Russian myth alive. Right? We discussed all those 4 stories. I'm not going to repeat it. But the fact that Ukraine will not be covered by NATO will give Russia even more opportunities to do what they love to do with Ukraine. They didn't want to let Ukraine go. They don't want to let Ukraine go today. Not military, not economically, not somehow. I remember 2004, the Orange Revolution in Ukraine. I was talking to my Ukrainian friends, and we were educated people, mathematical school, same thing as us. And they told me Yushchenko won, but we still have to negotiate with Russia because that's our place where we sell stuff. Who else is going to buy our stuff? And I asked them, well, hold on a second. You want independence from Russia, and at the same time, you still believe that's the only place to go? So that is a Russian narrative which was put inside of Ukrainians for generations, right? So if you think that NATO will say no and the Russia will leave Ukraine alone, no. They will try to find any way to control this territory. During the independence of Ukraine, you would be surprised, but places like Crimea by 2013 would have probably around 80% of all business belonging to Russians. I don't even know how many big companies in Ukraine actually belong to Russian money. We don't know that because that's a secret information, but it belonged them. So no, not going to help. It will not help. It would just stop maybe to do it slower, but this process will still continue because Russian Empire without Ukraine is not. Remember this picture I showed you last time, 15 people getting together? Ukrainian women here, Russian Belarusian men here, and the Russian guy in the suit and everybody else, and they keep them strongly together to make sure they're not going to go anywhere? That image in their heads. It doesn't matter, NATO or non-NATO. Talking about the territory and what Ukraine and what Russia has. Well, do you remember the story of Israel and what Clinton tried to do in 1992? Remember territory for peace? Really worked well, right, for both sides, right? So we have this example. And it's not me speaking. I know some Israeli people in Israel who are politicians, and they said to Ukrainians on the private conversation, don't do what we did. It didn't work, okay? That is why about territories. Now, what happened to the territories captured by Russia today, nobody knows. But what we know for sure, that in the history of empires, there was a time when a certain empire had the certain territory completely covered. And because of they become so weak, they couldn't keep it. They have to move away. Look how many right now. If you look at the territory, you want to see which territory belongs to whom. Look at the south of Ukraine captured by Russia. How many, we call partisan, and they call terrorist activities are going on against the Russians on their territory every day. Every day the collaborants are killed by the liberation movements of Ukraine on the territory captured. The people on the territory, they don't like Russians. They don't want Russians there, right? This is why I'm sure that the south of Ukraine will go back to Ukraine as soon as we have enough weapons. Story Donbass is a very hard story. The Donbass area, first of all, it's not homogeneous. There are certain pieces of Donbass which are more pro-Ukrainian, certain pieces are not. But you have to understand, for the last 8 years, the Russians did everything to kill as much as possible Ukrainian on those territories. Their children who were born in 2014 and later, they basically grew up on under the Russian influence, under the Russian sentiments. But it doesn't mean that this territory will belong to Russia forever. Because there are some examples in history called Alsace and Lotharingia, right? You know what I'm talking about? Have you heard about the city of Strasbourg? What country Strasbourg belongs to today? France. What is the percentage of German population in Strasbourg today? More than 50. There are more Germans in Strasbourg than French people. But nobody is asking to be a part of Germany, right? Because it was an agreement done during the World War II, and everybody said, well, that's what it is, right? But for 300 years or even more, there was a war about that territory, right? So there is a way of kind of finding the solution. And the solution will come only when the people, when the decision goes back to the laws, and the law and Budapest Memorandum and law and all of the agreements in the 90s were put this territory as Ukraine, even though there is a lot of Russian-speaking population today. So this is hard. And about Crimea we discussed, right? Now, talking about Ukraine lose. That's a good, interesting thought experiment. What does it mean, lose? I'll tell you one thing. Until last Ukrainian is alive on the territory of captured, the fight will continue. So losing is when basically losing meaning killing everybody, right? Hopefully not going to happen, right? And another thing is, I believe that there is a chance of some kind of slowing down at a certain point, maybe ceasefire, who knows, right? And the renegotiation, I don't know. But it's nothing to do with Ukraine. It's something to do with Russian leadership. So West needs to support Ukraine, to, as I said before, to push the leadership changes, to push the whole empire mentality. And Timothy Snyder said, loss to Ukraine will be lost to the rest of the world. If tyranny won once, it can continue winning and winning all around the places, okay? Because there is more than just Russia. There is Iran, there's China, right? There are other countries who kind of think that their neighbors actually own them something, or they own the neighbors. That could start the whole haywire all around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if we have time for another question. Okay, why don't we take one more, and before, sorry. Yeah, why don't we go to Zoom?
If somebody is hungry, by the way, we have a great food right here.
Okay, I'm sorry. On your way out, if you'd like to take one of these delicacies that was brought in, that would be great. And we have a question here, and Abby also had a question.
Quick observation. You and I were in email communications last week. I am very much a believer in third parties in this country, and I switched from being a libertarian for many years to joining the Green Party when I came up here to Massachusetts. The last year or so, I've been very alarmed to find that the Green Party is mostly a mouthpiece for Russia. There's even a photo of Jill Stein and Putin at a dinner for Russia today, about 5 years ago. What they do is the Green Party, I joined because of its environmental stand, but they are so anti-imperialist that they tend to be, they say, well, we are pacifist, so we want to let the Russians have their way. And I find that disturbing, that, a major third party spouts pro-Russian propaganda?
Well, as we discussed before, I'm ready to do the same conversations we have right here with the members of the Green Party. I'm absolutely sure that most of the people are just not informed enough. And they use a lot of Russian narratives. And Jill Stein, I have no idea what she's doing, what's in her pocket, who gave her money. There are a lot of Russian money in the United States. I told you billions of dollars are here. It's unfound sources of helping Ukraine. We'll discuss that separately. But we discussed our community would be very happy to have a conversation with the members of the Green Party and, have an honest, candid conversation. No blaming in each other, honest. Yeah.
Thank you. Abby, did you want to take this? And then we'll do one last question on Zoom.
Thank you.
And we'll have to close.
So, getting back to modern nation building.
Yes.
And you were talking about how there is, and I'm going to need some help with this, but some kind of a religious council that advises the government or the president, or
Yep.
Is that correct? From the various different religions and denominations and the like. So you all know what I'm going to ask, right? Does this include non-believers? Because I think very often they will ask the toughest ethical questions because they require that ethics not be based on any supernatural being. And there will be a certain number of them in Ukraine, and I'm wondering if they have any kind of representation on that council.
Let me answer your question, because again, I don't live there, I'm not a part of the council, but what I know is that that particular council is religious council. It's all religious. Definitely you can call atheism as a religion, maybe. Some people do, some people don't, I don't know, it's a philosophical question. I know that a lot of people in power in Ukraine are actually, in their heart, they're not believers. There are non-believers among the leaders of the Ukraine, for sure. And I don't know how many, I know they have a voice, and I know there is absolutely no discrimination in Ukraine towards non-believers, because guess what? The Soviet Union was a non-believer country, right? And going forward to propose something like that, maybe it makes sense. It should probably come from other experiences of other countries, right? Because if we want to represent everybody, well, why not? The reason for the religious council specifically is the following. I'll give you an interesting example. You will not maybe believe it, but in 1918, when the Ukrainian People's Republic was created, right, there was a special swearing ceremony for the military. The ceremony for Jews have a separate script than for everybody else. That was a part, why? Because of the different belief, and that particular swearing ceremony contained those phrases, right? So this is what the council do. Every new law comes in, every new discussion related to specifically religious questions, the questions of beliefs, discussed in this council, make sure that everybody agrees on that. If somebody doesn't believe it's offensive or it does not correspond to the traditions, they would say, no, we have to work on it. I believe in that kind of sense, I agree with you. But I'm sure that some of the people working with the council are not believers. Formally, I'm not sure if it's done. We probably have to kind of request more information. But I think since it is a big movement anywhere in the world, including Europe and the United States, I think it would be a good, good thing to do and, have that as the part of the story, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions on Zoom? And we'll take the last one from there, if so.
I don't see any other questions right now. There was one question from somebody named Bernie in the chat who was looking for a question of whether things are closer to ending or closer to escalating.
Well, the answer is very simple. Yes, it's close to the escalating. And the escalating is a very simple reason, because Putin people need a win, need something, need a victory somewhere. As you probably know, there's a big fight going on around the city of Bakhmut, which Russians call Artyomovsk. And that particular one is very bloody. Russians throwing everything because they wanted something. They wanted some kind of a victory, okay? They also, but for the Russian population, Bakhmut, Artyomovsk, that sounds really small. especially since they lost Kherson, for example. So they really want Kyiv. That's what they want. And a lot of people believe that they will start moving their army towards Kyiv, even though they know there's no chance. Just to show that they, maybe they could, maybe it was more millions of people. They probably would go for, watch out for bigger mobilization. And by the way, in Russia, there is a very underground mobilization of people. There are a lot of recruitments going on, not necessarily direct conscription, but recruitments going through the, government organizations and stuff. I think that a lot of military analysts believe that there's going to be escalation within the next couple of weeks. Because of the year of anniversary of the war, the Russia wants to do something. Plus, 23rd of February is the Soviet Union Military Day and the Russian Army Day, they called it right now. So I'm sure something will happen, but the change of mind will be only in case of fast delivery of the very serious weapons, and Russia probably not going to. But unfortunately, my prognosis is it's going to escalate. All right.
Thank you so much. This has been very helpful and interesting. Again, for those who are in the sanctuary in the church, please feel free to have something on your way out. There's a calendar available for sale for a suggested donation, and also some literature if you'd like to pick it up. Yes, Rich?
This is probably a question of you. Do we have some refreshments that are going to be served up there since the common room is occupied?
I'm thinking that because we've run overtime, Rich, maybe we can just have people grab them there as they leave. And Vlad, if people have additional questions, what email address might they send it to?
Okay, you have my email address, vladshapiro@gmail.com. Please join. One thing I would like to kind of put on the community, if you're interested in Ukrainian concert, Ukrainian exhibition of Ukrainian art in our community, please let us know. We'll be very, very happy to organize something like that, okay?
So for people who have questions and we couldn't get to them, my email address is mountainbreeze52@gmail.com. And I'm happy to pass along the questions to Vlad.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, and have a great day.